Day 11 of rising tensions, conflicting narratives, and a global audience trying to understand what is really happening. As the situation between United States and Iran continues to evolve, a new battle is unfolding, not only on the geopolitical stage, but also in the way the conflict is being presented to the world. So here's the big question. How is Washington framing this conflict on Day 11? Is the narrative focused on defense, deterrence, or something else entirely? And perhaps more importantly, how might this framing influence what happens next? Tonight we break down the strategy, the messaging, and the global implications. In modern conflicts, battles are not fought only with military capabilities. They are also fought with narratives. Governments carefully explain their actions to the public, allies, and international audiences. These explanations help shape how events are understood around the world. On Day 11 of this crisis involving Iran, officials in Washington have begun presenting a clearer explanation of their strategy. Understanding this framing helps answer several key questions. What objectives does the United States claim to be pursuing? How is the situation being explained to American citizens? And how are global allies reacting? But before we explore today's messaging, we need to understand how we arrived at this moment. The tensions between the United States and Iran did not suddenly appear overnight. For decades, the two countries have experienced a complex and often difficult relationship. Disagreements have centered around issues such as regional influence, security alliances, economic sanctions, nuclear policy debates. During periods of heightened tension, both sides typically rely on a combination of diplomacy, deterrence, and strategic communication. Over the past 10 days leading to today's developments, officials in Washington have been carefully outlining their perspective on events, and that messaging has gradually evolved. On Day 11, one theme stands out clearly in Washington's messaging. Officials emphasize defense and deterrence. In simple terms, the United States often frames its actions as efforts to protect regional stability and prevent further escalation. This narrative focuses on several key points. First, protecting American personnel and allies in the region. Second, maintaining freedom of navigation and economic stability. Third, preventing broader regional conflict. By emphasizing these goals, policymakers aim to explain their actions to both domestic and international audiences. But narratives like this always raise important questions. So let's ask an important question. Why is the framing of a conflict so important? The answer lies in public perception. Governments understand that public support plays a major role in foreign policy decisions. Political leaders must explain why actions are necessary and how they serve national interests. At the same time, messaging also signals intentions to other countries. If a government frames its strategy around deterrence, it may be trying to prevent further escalation. If the language becomes more aggressive, it could indicate a different strategic direction. On Day 11, the tone from Washington appears to emphasize control and restraint, at least publicly. Of course, every narrative has another side. Officials in Iran have presented their own interpretation of events. Iranian leadership under Ali Khamenei has often emphasized national sovereignty and resistance to external pressure. From Tehran's perspective, statements from Washington may be interpreted very differently. This contrast in messaging highlights an important reality of international politics. Two sides can describe the same event in very different ways. Understanding both perspectives is essential for analyzing the broader geopolitical situation. Another key player in the region is Israel. Israel closely monitors developments involving Iran and often works closely with the United States on regional security issues. Because of this partnership, Israeli leaders frequently coordinate messaging and strategic planning with Washington. However, Israel also maintains its own independent security policies. This means developments involving Iran can quickly involve multiple countries at once, and that complexity makes the situation even more difficult to analyze. Around the world, governments are paying close attention to how the United States frames the situation. Countries across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East understand that tensions involving Iran can influence global stability. For example, energy markets may react to uncertainty in the region. Shipping routes and trade networks could be affected. Diplomatic alliances may also shift depending on how the conflict evolves. That's why international leaders often encourage de-escalation during moments like this. One of the most interesting questions right now is whether the U.S. narrative will remain consistent. As situations evolve, messaging can change. New developments may lead governments to adjust their tone or strategy. On day 11, the emphasis appears to remain on deterrence and stability. But if events continue to escalate, policymakers might adopt different messaging, and those shifts can reveal important clues about future policy decisions. Looking ahead, analysts are watching several key signals. First, whether diplomatic channels remain active. Second, whether new statements emerge from Washington or Tehran. And third, how regional allies respond to the evolving situation. Conflicts often move through phases of tension, negotiation, and sometimes de-escalation. The next few days may reveal which path this situation takes. Day 11 of this crisis has shown that conflicts are shaped not only by actions, but also by the way those actions are explained to the world. How governments frame events can influence diplomacy, public opinion, and future decisions. But the bigger story is still unfolding, and many questions remain unanswered. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the current messaging from Washington is mainly about deterrence and stability, or could it signal a deeper geopolitical strategy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Respectful discussion helps everyone better understand these complex global issues. And if you want more clear and in-depth analysis of international politics and global tensions, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for our next update.